And I would agree, the ball indeed is in Iran's court, but a plan B would mean recognizing that the ball is in Iran's court and doing things to try to move that ball. Right now, the Biden administration's policy towards Iran has been continuously trying to look the other way in the face of Iran's increasing nuclear escalation, its violations of that 2015 nuclear deal known as the JCPOA, as well as violations of several more important tenets of the global non-proliferation regime. A plan B could mean more coercive diplomacy. It could mean a more united transatlantic front for pressure against the Islamic Republic. At a very minimum, it would mean using pressure at the International Atomic Energy Agency, having that organization's back. Its inspectors inside Iran have been harassed. Its inspectors inside Iran have been impeded. There have been 3 agency board meetings thus far in 2021, and the EU and the US did not issue a censure resolution. At a minimum, it would mean seeking a resolution of censure, perhaps moving Iran's nuclear file back to the Security Council and pressing for multilateral sanctions. And again, this is a very minimalist approach at this point in time.
But Behnam, the US has a number of levers to pull, and it has been pulling them independently throughout the course of these negotiations. But you've previously said that the US approach to Iran is, quote, flawed. So what is the American approach here what is it about the American approach that they're getting so wrong here, in your opinion? And what is it going to take in order to get Iran back to the negotiation table?
So you're right indeed to mention that the U.S. does have leverage, but when you've looked at instances of the Biden administration's interaction or diplomacy or even sanctions against the Islamic Republic, it hasn't been capitalizing on that leverage. For instance, there's only been very sporadic use of the sanctions that the administration retains on the books, sporadic enforcement, I should say, of pre-existing penalties. The Biden administration's use of the economic and coercive tool of sanctions is a lot more like shots across the bow rather than vigorous enforcement. So one option the Biden administration has is to move towards vigorous enforcement of existing penalties. If it wants to keep the space clear for nuclear diplomacy, it can move to vigorously enforce non-nuclear sanctions, particularly human rights sanctions, terrorism sanctions. The cabinet of Iran's new president, for instance, Ebrahim Raisi's cabinet, is the most sanctioned in the history of the Islamic Republic. Almost 40% of the individuals in that cabinet are subject to sanctions. So those sanctions could actually be enforced. That's one vector. Another is to actually use multilateral pressure, work with the Europeans at the International Atomic Energy Agency, hold Iran accountable for obscuring access to sites, not reporting undeclared nuclear material, and not providing access to scientists. So there are multiple fronts. The Biden administration thus far hasn't pivoted fully. It simply talked about a closing window for diplomacy.